Can't hear me. Now you can. Off to a hot start. Let's get some bats in here. Couldn't hear me. Weird. StreamYard. It's sometimes that mic lately is just this. I heard this happen to a buddy yesterday, and I kind of chuckled and said, no way that could happen to me. And here it is happening to me. All good. I love it. Welcome in, guys. Now you can hear me. There we go. We're off to a hot start here on a Wednesday. George is laughing at me in the background. Okay, I can run the show. I could do it. It's all good. No worries. Don't need you. Looks like I need you. Hot start here. Okay, as I said, you missed it. Do me a solid. If you're hanging out live, I see some people are, smash the like button. You have any comments, any questions, Keeper League stuff, you can leave them there in the comment section. Or if you don't want your buddies to know, you can reach out on the Twitter machine at Chris Meaney. I've had a few DMs. Slide on in. I'll do my best to give you some advice. Of course, I will give you the advice. I hope that it's good advice, and I hope I can help you and steer you in the right direction. If you don't have Twitter and you want to stay off the X machine, I don't blame you one bit. I'm sure you have an email account. Mean Streets, FTN@gmail.com. You can leave them there as well. I'm always circling back on these videos. So this show also available on iTunes and Spotify. If you could do me another solid and rate, review, subscribe, we'll take anything. We'll take a 1-star rating. We'll take a comment or two. If it does help me and help the show as we inch closer to week 1 of the NFL season. So welcome in. I see some people left right away because they couldn't hear me. We're off to a hot start here. Today's going to be quarterback tiers and rankings. We're going to talk about the quarterback position. Yesterday, we talked about the running back position, had some rankings. We adjusted a couple players. If you missed yesterday's show, you can go back and watch it on our YouTube page for free. Again, iTunes and Spotify. We addressed the running back position. Again, if you missed it, I moved Breece Hall down quite a bit. I didn't really touch Dalvin Cook. He was in the 20s for me. I have Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook in the early 20s. I think they're both very risky picks at this point. I think one of them could potentially be a league winner. I think this is just going to be a full-on timeshare. And maybe if you include Michael Carter or Izzy, it's a committee. We talked a lot about this backfield with Jake Seeley, who's super sharper than I am, of The Athletic. All in Football you can watch on Game Plus Network, listen on iTunes, and here on our FTN Network YouTube page as well. I didn't really touch Ramondre Stevenson. I moved Zeke up to roughly RB 40. If anything did happen to Ramondre Stevenson, as inefficient as Zeke has been over the past couple of years, I still think that he could fall into a pretty decent workload, and he's going to be the goal line back. I mean, maybe regardless. Like I could see him falling into 8 rushing touchdowns. Maybe he's only averaging 9 carries per game, but a majority of those carries inside the red zone. And then those are money touches. That's where the touchdowns do occur. Still think Ramondre is a solid low-end RB1, especially in a full-point league. He was top 5 in targets and catches last year among running backs, and I don't think that role will go away. And maybe he just overtakes Zeke like he overtook Damian Harris last year. And I think Zeke is an upgrade to this offense over Damian Harris. But you guys are all in here. Deesh, welcome in. 2 quarterback league. Guy has one. Okay, guy who has one reached out about trading back to the 5th. Really hope he does it. Okay, trading back. Yes. Get some picks if you can trade back. I think that's great. Can't hear you. No sound. I love you guys. You guys are great. There we go. We're doing it. Speaking of Jake Seeley, our show on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio returns this Saturday. The FTN Fantasy Sports Show with myself, Jake Seeley, and Lauren Carpenter. The past couple of weeks, we weren't around last week. Sirius was in Cleveland for the Fantasy Expo, and then 2 weeks ago, wow, it's just 2 weeks ago already. Time flies. We were at the Perfect Pint in New York, where we did the live radio show, the FTN Fantasy Show on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio, channel 87. So we'll be back this Saturday at 9 a.m. Eastern all the way up until 11 Eastern. We'll be with you for 2 hours. I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about the situation in New York and in New England. But again, today, quarterback. So before we get going with rankings and tiers and talk a little bit about the strategy, I want to talk about some advanced stats, some cool tools that we have over at ftnfantasy.com. I'm going to give you a little bit of a sneak peek of our projections. Like all these things are behind paywalls, but you guys have been so good to me. I want to share it all with you. I've been sharing all the goods here on the show. So I will share, my rankings, of course, the consensus, I'll tell you, like some players, some people that are higher or lower on other players, and then our overall projections, which includes absolutely everything that you want, like fantasy points, the ranking, the attempts, the completion, the passing touchdowns, the interceptions, the rushing yards, the rushing attempts, the rushing touchdowns, the auction value. Like for example, we got Mahomes and Hurts up at the top at $23. We have Patrick Mahomes for 371.7 fantasy points. We have Jalen Hurts for 371.1 fantasy points. Like those guys are separated by 0.6 points. And Jeff Ratcliffe is the man. I mean, he was number one ranker a couple years ago. His projections are on point. I want to share some advanced stats with you guys as well, some deep passing statistics, but included in our, FTN Plus account where you get all the goodness. You can just have the draft guide if you want, the draft kit, the articles, the weekly rankings, the waiver wires, pieces. But if you want some of these tools that we have, you can use promo code Meaney, save yourself a little bit of cash. We have deep passing stats. We have play action, passing against the blitz, against pressure, outside the pocket. We got it all, and it's pretty cool. I love the amount of data that we have, and we had Aaron Schatz on last week as well to, talk about his 2023 Almanac. And it's got a lot of amazing statistics in it as well. A book that any self-respecting NFL fan needs to purchase. That from Bill Simmons, $34.99 over at ftnfantasy.com, the football almanac. So let's get after the quarterbacks, though. This is, you just see right there one more time. George had the nice cover and, 500 plus player profiles from a fantasy football perspective. You got the cutting edge DVOA metrics, and you have all the goodness in there that'll help you, learn a thing or two about football. I mean, you're sitting at home, everything about football, and I feel like I know a lot as well. And I read it, and I don't know a lot. I know a lot more now. It's just very, very well put together book, team previews and everything. So it's a lot of cool things in there as well. So let's get after the quarterbacks. But before we do, I want to show you guys the quarterback leaders last year, fantasy points per game, which I think is super key. I left off Kyler. I left off Davis Webb and Sam Howell, Sam Howell had one game and it was 18.3 fantasy points in that showing, but he only played one game. So these are quarterbacks that played at least 12 games from last year. Standard, no 6 points for a passing touchdown. We have Lamar Jackson on the board who played 12. Kyler played 11 games last year, 18.2 fantasy points per game. So as you'll see a little bit later on, I have him way down my rankings. I just don't think he's a good option this year. More so maybe in a SuperFlex league, but in a single quarterback league, I mean, you're just waiting for this guy for who knows how long. Arizona's probably going to be the worst team in football this year. I think that actually they will be with confidence. I feel like I could say that. And if they're 0-5, 0-6, maybe they're thinking about Caleb Williams and the Heisman Trophy winner and the favorite again this year to win the award, and most likely going to be the first overall pick next year. We'll see what happens, but Arizona could be thinking about him. Kyler could be on a new team next year. Maybe Arizona trades back and they roll with Kyler. There's a lot of question marks, but it's the quarterback position. I don't think you really need to go that way. Look at like Jared Goff on this list undrafted. I remember last year he was quarterback 26. He was one of our favorite sleepers and a target of ours in Superflex leagues. There's always a quarterback or two that is on this list at the end of the season that didn't get drafted. Geno Smith is another guy. Daniel Jones wasn't really getting drafted as a top 10, top 12 quarterback. Trevor Lawrence was roughly quarterback 16. Justin Fields was roughly quarterback 15. So these guys really do, there's every year you go back to Ryan Fitzpatrick, you go Blake Bortles, Kirk Cousins has been on this list a couple times, never really thought of as a starting quarterback in a 12-team league. There's other guys that, aren't on here that maybe surprise you, like Aaron Rodgers, 14.1 fantasy points per game. That was good for quarterback 26. Of course, there's a lot of guys in there, like I mentioned, like Jameis Winston, 3 games, and Deshaun and Sam Darnold, 6 games. So really, Aaron Rodgers is roughly quarterback 20 in fantasy points per game. Another guy here and Tom Brady outside the list at 15.1. Justin Herbert, Justin Herbert's getting, drafted pretty early, 16.4 fantasy points per game for Herbert. A down season from him, only 25 passing touchdowns and 10 picks. And Dak Prescott, not even inside the top 15 of fantasy points per game last year, was limited to 12 games at 16.6. So Jalen Hurts at 25.2, Josh Allen at 24.7, Mahomes at 24.5, Joe Burrow at 21.9, Justin Fields at 19.7, thanks to 1,143 rushing yards and 8 rushing touchdowns, only threw for 17 touchdowns and had 22 passing yards. Lamar Jackson, as I mentioned, limited to 12 games and still had 700 rushing yards. Also 17 passing touchdowns like Justin Fields and the exact same amount of passing yards. 2,242. They both had the exact same amount of passing yards, but Fields played 3 more games. Daniel Jones in there, Geno Smith. We'll get into those guys a little bit deeper. Tua Tagovailoa we'll get into a little bit deeper as well. Tua was limited to 13 games last season, 3,500 passing yards, a really nice 25-8 touchdown to interception ratio. Not running around, of course, dealing with a few different injuries last year, more importantly, the concussion. We're really rooting for this guy here on this show, but man, I hope he does not suffer another concussion. Trevor Lawrence with the big leap forward in year 2. A lot of first-round rookie quarterbacks, they typically take that leap forward in year 2. I know Doug Peterson had a lot to say about that as the first-year head coach and getting rid of Urban Meyer and then bringing in a Christian Kirk and an Evan Ingram and a Zay Jones and having Travis Etienne because, of course, he missed his first season in the NFL due to an injury. Kirk Cousins and Jared Goff had that massive campaign there. So any surprises? Do you guys feel like there's any surprises looking at that list? I know you're probably already well aware. This is something that you can just look up in your home league, whether it's Sleeper, Yahoo, ESPN. But yeah, there it is. Like seeing Dimes at 7 feels so wrong, but he was so good. And he was. And I have Daniel Jones' statistics here up in front of me just to kind of show you the difference between Daniel Jones in 2021 heading into the final year of his option and the first year of Brian Daboll, and really just kind of feeling like he had one foot out the door. Early on, I just can picture him on the sidelines and Daboll like really giving it to him. And it's like this relationship, I mean, it doesn't seem like it's a good one. I don't know how long, Daniel Jones will last in New York and if he's going to be fantasy relevant, but 2021, he was limited to 11 games. He threw 10 touchdowns and had 7 picks. But before last season, he had 45 passing touchdowns, but he had 12 interceptions in his first year, 10 in his second year, and 7 in his third. So he had 29 interceptions in those 3 seasons, not to include like the fumbles he had. He was very careless with the football. I always felt like that season was tough. And even last year, there wasn't a lot of options in the passing game. There just really wasn't. Like Isaiah Hodges down the stretch had some good games. Richie James had some good games. We were targeting Darius Slayton's props, but there was just like 39.5 yards and 3.5 catches. Like these guys weren't really having great games. It was a lot of Daniel Jones and, running in Saquon Barkley. But to see him at that list at 7, only throwing 15 touchdowns last year, 15 touchdowns, but 5 interceptions. So he was first in adjusting completion percentage. He was very accurate. His completion percentage at 67%. Geno led all quarterbacks at 69%. So he took care of the ball. It was coaching. A lot of it was coaching. And, with Judge and quarterback sneak on 3rd and 8, there was no guys in motion. There was no creativity to the offense. And just immediately in their first practices in scrimmage and in mini camps, they were just like having guys in motion. I remember hearing Saquon say like, we didn't even have a guy in motion at all last year in practice. And that's all we did today in the first day of practice. So there was some creativity to the offense. And this year bringing in a Darren Waller, and I really trust Daboll, man. Like he's a great play caller. So I feel like he still has plans for Wan'Dale Robinson was the first wide receiver he drafted last year. And then Jalen Hyatt, who they drafted this year, and they bring in Paris Campbell and they bring in Darren Waller. I think, they're going to run some 2 tight end sets with Daniel Bellinger. I think is an underrated tight end, maybe not so much in fantasy, but real life. I think he has a lot to offer. So you got a nice little 1-2 punch there. And then, you still brought back Darius Slayton. You have Isaiah Hodgins on the team. They got a bunch of slot wide receivers, Cole Beasley, who has a relationship with Brian Daboll. I don't know how big of a role he'll have. Sterling Shepard. There's a lot going on there. I don't feel like we want any of them. Waller, I still think Isaiah Hodgins, although I didn't really like what I saw in preseason. It's just preseason, but other guys had the day off and he was out there playing. But maybe we're looking into that too much. But a big leap forward from Daniel Jones from 15.1 fantasy points per game to the 18.1 that you saw on the board, the 7 rushing touchdowns, a career high, the 708 rushing yards, a career high. But he's had at least 279. He had at least 279 in his first 3 seasons. So really getting into Daniel Jones here. Probably don't need to get into him too much more when we bring up where I have him ranked, but that was the big one for me too, right? Seeing Daniel Jones, seeing Geno Smith, like seeing Geno Smith on this list, I think is whoa. Like I was always Geno Smith as the week 1 starter, but Drew Lock was acquired and there was a little bit of a battle between the two guys. The reason I was leaning Geno Smith is because we saw him in the system in 4 games. It was a small sample size, but 4 games. He played good in those 4 games when Russ was dealing with that hand injury, the finger injury. But Geno, I mean, 10 years removed from basically being drafted and a starter in the league and getting a Pro Bowl nod. And no Pro Bowl nods, you can take that with a grain of salt, but it was certainly deserving for Geno Smith. As you take a look at some of the statistics that we have, deep passing touchdown leaders, these are 20 plus yards down the field. Jalen Hurts at 11, Derek Carr at 10, Geno Smith at 10, Aaron Rodgers and Josh Allen there. And then Geno Smith, the 17 games he played, as I mentioned, he led the NFL in completion percentage at 69.8%, 30 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, a little bit of a sneakiness on the ground, right? I know there's not a lot of design runs for Geno Smith, but he could tuck and run. I mean, he showed us last year, so it was a little bit of a floor there. And you see the fantasy points per game. I think, we included Kyler maybe in that at quarterback 9. And, he's getting drafted as quarterback 16, 15 really on average across the board for Geno Smith. I think he's probably the best quarterback going outside the top 12 at the position in terms of fantasy. You still have DK Metcalf, who everybody is drafting as a top 12, top 13 wide receiver, despite Tyler Lockett finishing ahead of him in fantasy points per game in each of the last 2 seasons. Lockett in the 30s, JSN, Jackson Smith-Njigba. I'll tell you what, this guy is a smooth route runner. He's going to be a nice player in the league. I don't know if as early as this season. I still think he's probably 3rd on the depth chart, but it's a nice trio that they have. They drafted arguably the best wide receiver in the draft, and they took arguably the best corner in the draft, and Devin Witherspoon. And I think their defense has improved. Defense played pretty good last year. They also drafted Zach Charbonnet in the 2nd round, like they drafted a running back in the 2nd round last year in Kenneth Walker. So this Seattle team is shaping up to be pretty solid. Good 1-2 punch on the ground, 3 wide receivers to throw the football to, and I think an improved defense. I think they're going to hang around with the Niners in the NFC West. That could mean more possessions for this offense. Maybe they score more points. It's Geno Smith. Even if he takes a step back, there weren't a lot of high ceiling games from Geno. There was just consistency across the board. So I get that's probably why he's going roughly as quarterback 15 and 16 in drafts at the moment. But I think he's one of the better options to kind of wait it out. Maybe you want to draft Anthony Richardson, roughly quarterback 10 off the board. Then you take Geno Smith. And maybe you just kind of play it cool and patient with Anthony Richardson. But I think Geno, we talked about it, just proof right there. Every year there's a quarterback that kind of falls a little bit later on. And he's one of those guys. Let's get into the rankings. Tier 1 and tier 2 here. No surprise on the left. That's the tier for me. Don't let anybody tell you it's not the tier. I saw something on NFL Network today about Jalen Hurts and Justin Fields being in tier 2. I mean, what does Jalen have to do? We just told you the projections. The projections is not even anything like being biased. I'm not the only one that has Jalen Hurts ranked as quarterback 1. Our guy Ratcliffe has as quarterback 2. Mahomes is quarterback 1. 371.7 fantasy points for Mahomes, 371.1 fantasy points for Jalen Hurts, 366.4 fantasy points for Josh Allen. I mean, I wouldn't argue with anybody on this tier or the order. Yeah, the schedule is super easy last year for the Eagles, and guess what? They ran the ball in the second half. Maybe they'll be in more competitive games this year. Maybe Jalen Hurts will have to throw the football a little bit more. Maybe we scale back from some of the rushing yards that he had. Maybe he's going to pass the ball a little bit more. He's got 2 alpha wide receivers. He's got a tight end that nobody really talks about in Dallas Goedert. and it's behind the best offensive line in football. So Jalen Hurts at 25.2 fantasy points per game last year, 3,700 passing yards, 22 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 13 rushing touchdowns. We don't even have him coming close to that number in our projections for 13 rushing touchdowns. We have him for 11. So kind of close, I guess. We have him for 740 rushing yards. He led all quarterbacks in goal line carries last year with 20, and he converted 9 of them. And they have that little tush push, that rugby scrum quarterback sneak that half the league wanted to remove from the Eagles game. And it's still going to be a thing this year. And it's worked perfectly last year. It's going to work again this year quite a bit. There's just nothing you can do. This is nothing you can do about it. The dude squats 600 pounds. Like, there's just nothing you can do. As for Patrick Mahomes, right, he showed us last year. I mean, not going to miss Tyreek Hill at all. There was no wide receiver that stepped up to be his number one guy after Travis Kelce. And all Mahomes did is throw for 41 passing touchdowns, which was the most he threw for 50 in his rookie campaign and 5,000 yards, but he had a career high 5,200 passing yards. Of course, he played the one more game, 358 rushing yards. He's had 300 rushing yards in 3 straight seasons. He had a career high 4 rushing touchdowns. 416.4 fantasy points, just behind that rookie season of 417. So did not miss a beat. Like I said, without Tyreek Hill. There's a lot of wide receivers that are on the Kansas City squad that we think that we like. They're getting hyped up. I mean, Kadarius Toney hype every year with Kadarius Toney. Now, in the first time that he touched the field in practice, he suffered a knee injury, and he is expected to be ready for week 1, but he's behind the 8 ball here. Sky Moore, excuse me. MVS is always on the field. I mean, I'm not even crazy about MVS, but he's always on the field. Justin Ross, it looks like he avoided a significant injury. I saw reports that he's on the practice field today. Richie James, I think, is sneaky. They just have a lot of different moving pieces now in Kansas City. I don't know if any of them are going to step up and be a true number 1 wide receiver. It's Travis Kelce. Kelce is the man. Kelce, you can just count on over 1,000 yards, 100 catches, double-digit touchdowns. He's the go-to guy as long as those guys are paired up together. That's going to be the number 1 option. But it's Andy Reid. It's the play calling. It's a pass-first offense. It's Jerick McKinnon, who's catching balls out of the backfield. It's Isaiah Pacheco, who caught 6 passes in the playoffs and 10 catches in his last 7 regular season games, despite only having 3 in his first 10. Like, he's out there running routes with Mahomes in practice, and I love seeing that. It's Andy Reid is going to go down as one of the GOAT coaches of all time, the best coach. I would say right there with Bill Belichick, maybe just behind him, and we'll see what else they can get done. And they get a couple more Super Bowls. Does Mahomes finish with 5 Super Bowls, and Andy Reid has got 5 rings, and he was always one of the coaches that just couldn't get it done in the playoffs with the Eagles all those years. And I mean, he's a heck of a coach, and he's a heck of a play caller. There's no worries about Mahomes, and I don't have any worries about Josh Allen either. I mean, he's still on this list for me. He's still in that first tier. I've been in drafts where, he has gone as the first quarterback off the board. Heck, he may be the safest. Like, he's probably safer at this point than if you don't really believe in Jalen Hurts, and you think the negatives with Jalen Hurts would be like pros and cons. The cons would be, listen, there's a new offensive coordinator in town. There's a new defensive coordinator in town too. Philly may struggle. The schedule is tougher, right? According to the opponents that they like, the opponents that they have on their schedule this year, their record last year, this would be the toughest schedule in the NFL for a team, Philadelphia. I thought last year wasn't that easy. I just thought there were a lot of brutal teams in the NFL, and they beat up on some of them. But for Josh Allen, I mean, I can't see him regressing that much. I would have liked to see the Bills get another wide receiver opposite of Stephon Diggs. I know Stephon Diggs wanted that as well. They decided to draft Dalton Kincaid, who actually reminds me a little bit of Travis Kelce. We'll pump the brakes. I don't think he's going to be Kelce right off the hop. I don't know. Kelsey's going to go down as one of the best tight ends of all time, and at least top 3 or 4, in my opinion. Kincaid is a guy that can, find open spaces. He's doing some great things in camp. Gabe Davis, still a monster, right? I mean, not a big target hog, but still a deep threat guy who can, explode for Josh Allen. We'll see a leap forward here from James Cook catching balls out of the backfield. We'll see what Shakir could do. Excuse me. There's a lot of guys that, could pop off at certain times for Josh Allen. He's been a beast in the red zone. Like 8 rushing touchdowns, 9 rushing touchdowns, 8, 6, 7. It's like every single year Josh Allen They always say that they're going to cut back from some of the touches inside the red zone. They don't want him running as much. It's easy to say that. Of course, you don't want Josh Allen running as much. You want to protect him. Like, he suffered the elbow injury last year. He was turning the ball over more than he turned it over the previous 2 years. He was turning it over inside the red zone. You want to protect Josh Allen. Maybe that's part of why they brought in Damian Harris, Latavius Murray's on the squad. Maybe some guys that can like get in the red zone or get in the end zone when they're in the red zone around the 5. But Josh Allen, 600 rushing yards, 500, 400, back-to-back years with 700. I just think it's in his nature to run. He's just does such a great job at, getting those extra yards. He's such a beast, right? And the completion percentage, 52 and 58 in year 1 and year 2. The outlier is the 69% season, but 63 in each of the last 2 years, 35 plus touchdowns in 3 straight seasons on top of what he can do with his legs. He's perfectly fine. I have no issue. And also, as we wrap up from tier 1, these guys are going roughly quarterback 18 to 25. Best ball formats, they're going, you could see a quarterback go in the second round. You can see all 3 of them go in the second round. In quote unquote expert leagues, they're going in the 4th and the 5th. We did a mock here yesterday on Set Bet Spike where I believe Mahomes went early 2nd, and usually they're gone by the mid 3rd, that first tier. I've kind of changed my tune over the years because I do think it's important to have a rushing quarterback or an alpha quarterback. Again, we can look at this list. We see guys. We can identify breakout candidates like we did last year in Fields and Trevor Lawrence. Geno is a surprise. Daniel Jones, kind of, right? Jared Goff, we liked him, but we didn't think he'd be a top 12 quarterback. Like, he was drafted as quarterback 26. So there are guys that you can wait. We'll identify a couple here on this show. But as you saw with the fantasy points per game, there's a pretty big gap. Is there not? Like that tier from 25, 24, and 24, even getting into the next tier, which we'll get into with Burrow, Fields, and Jackson. Those guys are like high teens. And I think they could live in I think Burrow can get back to 21. I think Fields can get to that 21. Lamar's got to 21, 22. Maybe even the ceiling to get to the 24 with this new look offense, right? They ran 11 personnel fewer than anybody last year. With Todd Monken in town, it's going to be a new look offense and a pass happy one. And this is the best wide receiver room Lamar Jackson's ever had. But look at the gap. Like, it's almost 10 more fantasy points per game. Like, yes, there are several quarterbacks who had 15 plus fantasy points per game. Yes, there are quarterbacks that you can stream, pick up off the waiver wire. Maybe they're in better situations. You soak up some of the value at running back and wide receiver instead of addressing the quarterback position. I have no issue with anybody if they want that first tier. Heck, I want a piece of that first tier. I want Jalen Hurts in my life and Josh Allen in my life. And because of the rushing floor that they bring and the ceiling that Mahomes has, you can still build yourself a really nice team doing that. What I will say is that you should do some mocks. You should try to get those quarterbacks, maybe one of those 3, and see what the rest of your team looks like. Where does it hurt you? It may hurt you a little bit at the running back position. There are wide receivers that you could go running back and get yourself an alpha running back and a quarterback, and then really hammer home some wide receivers. It's going to feel a little weird. You're not going to have yourself a top 12 wide receiver, but maybe Amari Cooper is your wide receiver 1 or DK Metcalf. Maybe T. Higgins falls a touch. Like, it's possible. Olave's usually in early 3rd, late 2nd. If you're picking at that first part of the draft, you could maybe go with Justin Jefferson, get one of those quarterbacks, and then you can get another wide receiver and really punt RB, or get yourself maybe a Ramondre or a Travis Etienne as your RB1. That's possible. You could do something like that. You could roll the dice on a Jacobs or a Jonathan Taylor. I would just suggest doing mocks and do different things. And you can get a bit of a feel of what quarterback you do like. But welcome in. Daily handle, fantasy football season. Love it. Tougher games makes Hurts even better. I agree. I feel like Lou Testa, I feel like we're alone on that island. People are saying, oh, it's a tougher schedule, so he'll struggle. But there was a lot of games last year that I don't know if they trailed until like week 7 in the second half. They just like ran the clock out, ran the ball. If these games are tougher, and there are some really tough ones out of the bye, they got like Kansas City, Buffalo, San Fran, Seattle. They got some tough matchups. Dallas is in there. There's going to be some competitive games. It means that maybe they'll throw the football a little bit more. Since it's a QB show here's a question. And a 2-keeper, he's debating between Hurts in the 3rd or Walker in the 7th. Already locked Christian Watson in the 16th. Other managers have already kept Tua and Mahomes. It's a really good question. I think if it was a wide receiver, I may do like a I may lean a wide receiver, like the value there. I kind of value wide receivers more than running backs in keeper leagues because the shelf life is so short for running backs. I think with Mahomes gone and Tua gone, and it's a 3rd round pick, I don't know where you're picking. I don't think it really matters. He's probably going to be gone before the 3rd. And this is a 2 keeper league, not just a single quarterback 2 keeper. I would probably go Hurts. I'm down on Walker. I'm a little bit sour on Kenneth Walker. I know a lot of his yards came via the explosiveness that he had in his game. That's great to see. But he struggled in short yardage situation. He didn't run any routes. Seattle drafted a running back in Zach Charbonnet in the 2nd. He was not super efficient. Lou, I know you know this, and I have some statistics up here, but so 11th in carries, 3rd in red zone touches, 13 opportunity share, which is all great. But 2 for 9 inside the 5. The success rate was super low. Out of 42 qualified backs, he was 41 out of the 42 with backs with at least 100 carries. He was 4th in explosive run rate. He had 1,000 yards on 200 carries, which is really nice to see, but no work in the passing game. And I wonder if it's going to be a 60-40, if it's going to be a bit of a timeshare, and Charbonnet catching balls out of the backfield. Maybe he's more efficient in the red zone. I'm a little bit worried about Kenneth Walker. So I lean with Hurts there. Let's get back into the quarterbacks. We also have some MLB picks around out Mean Streets for the Game Plus Network crew as well. Okay. Tier 2. I think kind of went over a lot of it. Joe Burrow, I still got him at 5. I've seen him fall to 6, 7, 8 in the flex league. I think we have it here. I don't know if we have. Here we go. Eisenberg, I believe, took him. What was this? Round 6. So this is a good feel, right? And I agree with, if you can get Mahomes or Allen or Hurts in this range, I think that's good value. So Allen was the first quarterback off the board, Mahomes and Hurts, and then we get Lamar there, comes back around. I took Fields, and then Justin Herbert's there, and then look at the value on Joe Herbert, and I really like the value on Trevor Lawrence there, or on Joe Burrow. Let's combine Herbert and Burrow. What do we get? QB1, no doubt. But the calf injury, right? So you got the calf injury there. I think if you see Burrow fall like he did in that draft, maybe just get yourself a quarterback that you can roll out for the first couple weeks of the season. It could be a Geno. I don't think it needs to be an expensive quarterback. Just make it one of your last picks, roll out that quarterback for the first 2 weeks, and maybe Burrow's fine anyways. Week 1 or week 2, we'll see. But I got no issues with Burrow. It's the same offense as Zach Taylor. It doesn't matter that he's not on the field with these guys. He's thrown the football he's thrown the football for years to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd is probably the best. It's probably the best wide receiver room in the game. You guys agree? It probably is. Like for the Eagles, they just got the 2, right? And Smith and AJ Brown. For Miami, it's just the 2 in Waddle and Hill. Boyd is probably the best, one of the better 3s in the game. So it's the best wide receiver room, I think, in football. And they brought in Irv Smith, as Zach Taylor comes from Sean McVay, and he's a good coach. I think he's a good play caller, and this offense won't miss a beat. So I've moved him down. When the injury happened, I moved him down, and then I've recently moved him back up. But it's the same tier for me. As for Justin Fields, I think again it's DJ Moore. It's DJ Moore. We have, again, I'll go back to our projections here. Sneak peek. We got Burrow at 4 with 344 fantasy points. We have Lamar Jackson at 5 with 339 fantasy points. We actually have Herbert next. Justin Fields at 313 fantasy points. We only have him for 18 passing touchdowns, and his passing yards is at 2,600. I think he can get to 3K. With DJ Moore. We only have Justin Fields for only 986 rushing yards and 7.8 rushing touchdowns. I mean, the guy was an absolute league winner last year, and he showed us that he is quarterback proof or matchup proof, right? He didn't throw the ball to. Mooney missed a bunch of time. Cole Kmet popped off at the end of the season. That was great. Chase Claypool wasn't really sprinkled in at all. Dante Pettis, Economy is St. Brown, Byron Pringle, like, come off it, right? You're bringing DJ Moore, the explosive. We already saw it in one preseason game and one catch behind the line of scrimmage. It may even be a 1-yard pass. I'm not even really 100% sure that it was, but he took it to the house, and that's what he can do. Right, he's explosive after the catch. These playmakers are going to make these quarterbacks better. I said it a few times, but it's Diggs for Allen and AJ for Hurts. And I think that this is the comparison this year. He won't get MVP votes. I don't buy into that. I saw on ESPN that Justin Fields has been the guy that's been voted bet on the most for to win the MVP. I think at 25-1. I just don't think the Bears will be good enough. Like, he may have a good season. He may break out as a passer. Maybe he lives in maybe he gets 300. I would say 3,200 passing yards is certainly attainable for Fields, and the defense has improved. Adding more, I still think they need more, but Mooney is a 2 and Claypool is a 3. I think that's better suited for those guys, and I like Cole Kmet as a tight end. I don't know how many pass attempts there. I don't think there'll be a lot for Claypool or for Mooney to be, all that productive from a fantasy standpoint. Both those guys are completely off my list, and I'm not interested at all. But Kmet, I don't mind. I know I liked him a lot more last year, but Kmet and Moore, I think, are decent targets. And I think Fields he's going to do enough with his legs, even if he's a brutal passer, to finish where he finished last year. As again, I'll go back to this list as quarterback 5 in fantasy points per game. So adding a weapon like Moore, I think, will improve him. Maybe give him another 800,000 yards with his arm, and maybe we scale back on the rushing yards and touchdowns, but he's still going to get it done. As for Lamar, I mean, we've seen Lamar. I mean, Lamar is not too far removed from that MVP season that he had, and I don't think he gets back to that campaign, but this is going to be a new offense. As I mentioned, Todd Monken is in town. They ran 11 personnel fewer than anybody. They ran a lot of 11 personnel in the first preseason game. This is going to be a new look offense. That MVP season that he had was 36 touchdowns, 3,100 passing yards, 6 interceptions, 1,200 rushing yards, and 7 touchdowns. He's had at least 700 rushing yards in every year, but his rookie season, he had 695. And he was limited to 12 games last year and 12 games in 2021, and he still had 700 rushing yards. I would imagine the team wants to see him run less, again, just like Josh Allen. Run less, right? We want to protect you. You got paid now. Like, I know it's in your nature. You're really good at running, but let's scale it back here a little bit. We have guys to throw the football to. Odell Beckham Jr., Mark Andrews is a mismatch. He's going to be the number 1 option for Lamar Jackson. Zay Flowers is just a great route runner. He's going to see a lot of one. Rashad Bateman, if he's still healthy, he's going to be able to stretch the field. And J.K. Dobbins is a good back, man. He's a really good back. He's shown us that in a small sample, I think 22, 23 games, he's been super efficient, over 5 yards per carry. He doesn't need a lot of touches to accumulate yards. And I know that Lamar runs it in, but in J.K. Dobbins, I think he was like 8 touchdowns in his last 8 or 9 games in his rookie campaign. I don't believe Gus Edwards is going to be a big factor unless something happens to J.K. Dobbins, and Dobbins won't catch a lot of passes, maybe 1 or 2 a game, if that. But it's going to be a good offense. It's going to be a really, really good offense here in Baltimore. So I do have Lamar ahead of those guys, but in the same tier. Let's dig a little bit deeper. Let's go into tier 3 and into tier 4. Tier 3, Herbert and Lawrence side by side. I recently moved Herbert up, but these guys are closer in my projections than we have over at FTNFantasy.com. I mentioned Herbert. We have him as quarterback 6 here, 323 fantasy points. We have him for 30 passing touchdowns and 12 interceptions. And we have Trevor Lawrence just behind Fields there as quarterback 8, 4,000 passing yards, only 26 passing touchdowns, though. And both guys living in the 200-yard range in terms of rushing yards, but we have 4.3 rushing touchdowns for Trevor Lawrence and only 1.2 for Herbert. Down year for Herbert, right? I mean, we talked about it. He was 17th in fantasy points per game last season, 13 roughly when you take out some guys that, take out Lamar or Kyler if you want, a couple other dudes in there. But a bit of a step back. The completion percentage jumped up from 65 to 68, 5,000 passing yards and 38 passing touchdowns, down to 4,700 yards and just 25 passing touchdowns from him last year. But the new look offense, again, like Baltimore, Kellen Moore is going to do great things for this offense. I've already started to hear players inside the offense talk about how different it is already. Keenan Allen, I know he's a slot guy and I know he's over 30 now, but when he's on the field and he's healthy, he's a go-to guy. Mike Williams, that's the biggest thing, is if these guys need to be on the field. When they weren't on the field last year, Herbert struggled, right? He's thrown the football to Joshua Palmer. He's not a one, and he's an afterthought now. I love him, the Canadian boy, but Quentin Johnson was drafted, and I think Quentin Johnson will do more as a 3 than Joshua Palmer did as a 3 inside this offense. You still have Eckler, who has more touchdowns than anybody over the last 2 years in the NFL, over 100 grabs last season. So Mike Williams moving him down the field, other guys like Quentin Johnson moving him down the field deeper. And Herbert's got such a great deep ball too. So everybody is counting on that breakout season. And what does that breakout season look like? Can he get 40 passing touchdowns? I mean, he had 38 one year. Sure. How much more, 5,000 passing yards? Like, can he get 52, 53? Like, that's asking a lot. I think he's a decent flyer in terms of MVP, lead the NFL in passing touchdowns and passing yards. They're pretty close to me still. And Trevor Lawrence, I like Trevor Lawrence, and we saw the leap forward from him with Doug Peterson. So I don't think we need to spend too much time on anymore on that tier. But we certainly saw it from Trevor Lawrence. And again, I can rattle it off. I mean, the difference is significant. 12 touchdowns and 17 picks, 59 completion percentage, and 3,600 passing yards for Lawrence as a rookie. He jumped from 36 to 41 passing yards, 12 touchdowns to 25. He threw 8 picks as opposed to 17 in his rookie campaign. He didn't run more, but he had 291 rushing yards, and he had 5 rushing touchdowns. We saw him call his own number a little bit more inside the red zone. Just a touch. Tier 4, Deshaun Watson, Anthony Richardson, Geno Smith, Daniel Jones, Dak Prescott, Tua Tagovailoa, Kirk Cousins. So we touched on most of those guys. Deshaun Watson really struggled as a passer, shook off some rust. I think he'll be much better as a passer. Again, let's not forget that he can run around a little bit as well. And he only played a handful of games. So now he's learning the playbook with the team. Shake off the rust. I think he has upside to be a top 5 quarterback, but he's in this tier for me. Anthony Richardson, we already addressed. He could be the worst passer in football. Go back and look at Tim Tebow's numbers. He can be the worst passing quarterback this season, but he can still do it with his legs. I think it's very important that Jonathan Taylor is under center, though, for Anthony Richardson, who will, by the way, be the week 1 starter for the Indianapolis Colts. Geno Smith and Daniel Jones, we already hit on. Dak Prescott is he's just okay for me. I don't know. I think last year was probably an outlier in terms of interceptions. He's not really a guy that has thrown a lot over the course of his career. 15, that was the most he's ever thrown. He only played 12 games and led the league, right? Him and Derek Carr, they're both number 1 in terms of odds to lead the NFL in interceptions of this season. Dak, I don't know if he's going to get to that 4,900 yard season and 30 touchdown season that he had in 2019. And he ran around a lot. Not a ton, but 357, 300, 277. I don't know if the injury, a few years ago, if that was a big reason why he didn't run as much. 182 rushing yards in 12 games. So maybe he's flirting with 250, 260. Maybe he runs a little bit more with no Zeke there. I think they're really going to miss Dalton Schultz in the middle of the field. I think that he was a big time player for Dak Prescott. Ferguson's doing some nice things. They drafted Skoronek. It's nice that they brought in Brandon Cooks. They certainly needed somebody opposite of CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Cooks. I mean, doesn't matter what team he's on, what quarterback. He's a walking 1,000 yards. So I think he's a good target, and CeeDee Lamb's going to be the go-to guy here. Dak is fine. I just think that honestly, there's a touch of a higher ceiling with Deshaun, with the rushing upside for Jones and for Richardson, and I believe in Geno and what he did last year. As for Tua, if you just told me to rank on upside alone, he'd be at 9 or 10 on this list. But I have to be concerned because of the concussions. So I am concerned. But looking at our advanced stats, Tua was number 1 among quarterbacks with 300 passing attempts in ADOT at 9.56. Everybody talks that he can't throw the ball deep down the field with accuracy. Well, 2 years ago, he was number one in deep ball accuracy. And last year, he was number one in deep ball percentage at 49.12%. He can throw the ball down the field, guys. And he's got weapons in Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle who can get down the field and who are explosive with the ball in their hands. So Tua was not only number one in deep percentage completion, that's passes over 20 yards down the field. He was number one in ADOT, average depth of target at 9.56. He was number one in adjusted yards per attempt at 9.2. He was number one in passing yards per attempt at 8.9. His passer rating, using our advanced stats over at ftnfantasy.com, was 105.5. That was second to Mahomes, who was 105.8. So his numbers really good when he's playing. The team was basically undefeated when he was under center, but we have to be concerned with the injuries, and that's why I have him where he is. I think if you draft Tua, you want to have a backup plan like a Kirk Cousins, Jordan Love, or somebody like that. Kirk Cousins is fine, right? He's going to have his moments and, maybe on the road or, under the bright lights and prime time, but it's going to be a pass-happy offense. I don't think they're going to have a lot of success running the football. The defense still has holes, and I believe in Kevin O'Connell. I think he's a good play caller. I think he did some good things last year. So Cousins, you bring in Jordan Addison, you got TJ Hawkinson. I think it's going to be a very, very pass-happy offense. Maybe I should have Kirk Cousins a little bit higher. I got Dak as the quarterback too in SuperFlex leagues. I like it. I dig it. That's kind of where he should go. Honestly, it's probably where he should go. He should be a number two. I think after Trevor Lawrence, maybe after Deshaun Watson, all these guys are probably streaming options. Like, yeah, you could play them. They don't have the same upside as I just think it's important to get a top 8 quarterback. I really do think it's important to get an alpha quarterback. I think there's a big gap after this tier 3 to tier 4. I think there's enough of a gap where you want to roll those guys out every week. And the other guys, maybe you're looking at as streamers. I'm going to go a little bit longer here, George, another 5 minutes since the mic was muted for the first 2 minutes of the show. We're going to keep going here. Tier 5 and tier 6. I don't have a ton to say. Rodgers, coming off arguably his worst season of his career, but a rejuvenated Aaron Rodgers, familiar with Nathaniel Hackett. Garrett Wilson's definitely in for a breakout campaign. Alan Lazard is back. You got a 1-2 punch into the backfield in Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook. I think it's the best 1-2 punch in football. And if it's not, maybe the best 1-2 punch in football is Rodgers' former teammates in A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones. And just go back and look at what Aaron Jones has done in the passing game over the past couple of years. He has 6 rushing touchdowns over the last 2 years, and he's still finished, as a solid RB2, high-end RB1, low-end RB2, or low-end RB1. And a high-end RB2. Jared Goff, go look at the splits. Certainly significant. Struggled on the road, struggled outside of a dome, but I think it's a good offensive line. It's another good 1-2 punch out of the backfield. Amon-Ra is legit. Sam Laporta is a really good tight end. I'm worried about Jameson Williams, Marvin Jones. I think he's going to take a bit of a step back, Jared Goff, but I still have him here at quarterback 17. I think that Russell Wilson is going to take a step forward here with Sean Payton, and Jerry Jeudy was great down the stretch of the season. I think there's more that Cortland Sutton can offer to this team, and Greg Dulcich. I don't care that Troutman's playing over him in the preseason. I think Greg Dulcich could have a Jimmy Graham type role for Sean Payton inside this offense. I don't think he's going to be as good as Jimmy, but I think he can play that role. Did you hear? He played basketball in college. And then they've got good pass catching running backs in Javonte Williams and Samaje Perine. Derek Carr there as well with the Saints. Derek Carr is going to have, this is going to be the best defense he's ever had. It's a good offensive line. Michael Thomas, certainly need him to stay healthy. Thomas, is talking up Carr. Carr's talking up Thomas. I mean, sure, take that with a grain of salt. It's really nice to see and hear. But I do believe Derek Carr is a good quarterback. I think last year is an outlier. I don't think it's somewhere in between, 2 years ago and last year. Not as good 2 years ago, not as bad in terms of his accuracy. He's always been among the leaders in terms of accuracy. He's not going to run, but you're going to have Alvin Kamara there after the 3-game suspension. We love Chris Olave on this show. Got a bunch of different tight ends there on the squad. Jimmy Graham is back again. But Juwan Johnson, I think, is a good one as well. Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy is going as like quarterback 24, 25. Brock Purdy is one of my favorite quarterbacks to target in SuperFlex leagues. He's going to be the week one starter. He's deserved that. I don't understand like what they're going to do with Trey Lance. I don't know. They spent all that capital and they're not even going to give this guy a shot. But Brock Purdy, he was undefeated when he played. I mean, he almost went to the Super Bowl if he didn't get knocked out there in the game against the Eagles. But he had 2 passing touchdowns in all 6 of his starts in the regular season. He was very accurate, 76 completion percentage in his second start and 75 in the final one. He finished with a 67% completion rate, 13 touchdowns and 4 picks. Decent ADOT. Most of his passes were, short, but he showed that he could throw the ball down the field. It's just Kyle Shanahan. It's a weak NFC conference. It's a schedule where the Niners are going to beat up on some teams. You got CMC, you got Kittle, you got Ayuk, you got Debo. There's a lot of yak monsters there. I think he's undervalued. I don't understand why he's going as quarterback 25, 26. I think he's a great super flex target. On the right side here, Jordan Love. I think he could surprise some people. I do believe it will be a run-first offense with the 2 backs, but I like Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, and Romeo Doubs. I think Love will really surprise some people, and he could surprise some people with his legs. Kenny Pickett, another team that's going to be run first, doesn't have a game with 2 passing touchdowns. He can run himself. And he's got some options in the passing game. We like Pickett to Pickens. Deontay Johnson's definitely going to score a touchdown this year. Pat Freiermuth is a really good tight end. So typically we see these first round quarterbacks take the breakout, get the breakout in the following season. Matthew Stafford, I just don't really want to draft him. I mean, he's older. I know they bolstered the offensive line. I just don't trust him at this point. He just seems to be hurt. If Kupp goes down again, this is going to be just a mess. You're not going to want to start Stafford. I know the defense is taking a step back and they're going to chuck a lot, but I'm just not interested. Bryce Young, I'm not super interested either. I think he's definitely going to be the starter all year long. There's a lot of new pieces in Carolina's offense. Miles Sanders, Adam Thielen. I really like Mingo as a target. DJ Chark is a deep threat guy. Hasn't really shown us they can stay healthy. Hayden Hurst is a really new look offense. I think they could struggle at times offensively. I like Sam Howell. I think he's a good little pick in super flex leagues. I could see him finishing as a top 20 quarterback. We love Jahan Dotson in this show, and Terry McLaurin's been consistent. This is like quarterback number 14 since Kirk Cousins left in 2017, but I think he's going to win the job. I think he's going to be the starter, and he did some okay things in week 18 against the Cowboys, and there was a lot on the line for Dallas. I think they play their starters in that game, and Sam Howell ended up with 18 fantasy points. This is one start, but he ended up with 18 fantasy points, and he was solid. And then Tannehill and Kyler in there. And then we round out here with just guys like who really cares. Jimmy G, Mac Jones, CJ Stroud, Desmond Ridder, Baker Mayfield. I got Baker Mayfield at 32. I think, Baker could actually be, I think in the first couple weeks of the season, if Baker plays well, people be like talking about him, like rush to the waiver wire, pick him up. Can you start him in a 12-team league? And no, you can't. You can start him in a super flex league. Maybe. Still got Godwin. Still got Evans. I saw Russell Gage get carted off today. That's a bummer. I love Cade Otton. And I like Rachaad White catching balls out of the backfield. There's some options there for Baker Mayfield. He could be okay in this offense, but I have him at 32 because I feel like if you're the Bucs, you got to see what you have in Kyle Trask. Like Baker's not the future. Trask probably isn't either. But the moment that Baker struggles or they have a couple losses in a row, that's where they make that quarterback switch. So I don't think you can trust really any of these guys, even in a super flex league. CJ Stroud was just one game, but he struggled 2 for 4 in the preseason game, threw some picks. Mac Jones could lose his job. Jimmy G gets hurt a bunch. I think Jimmy G's certainly got the higher ceiling of these guys. Atlanta's offense is going to be brutal. They're going to run a lot, get some weapons, but I don't think Ridder is going to be a guy that you want to roll out. I think the ceiling is capped, but Kyler and Tannehill as we get out of here. Kyler and Tannehill, I actually kind of already said it on Kyler. If you're just joining us, you go back at the first part of the video. For Kyler, just can't stay healthy. I don't know if he can't stay healthy. That's probably unfair, but I just don't know when he's going to play. And if he's ready to go week 5 or week 6 and they're winless, then they may just take a seat, right? We're not rushing you back. If you want to take him as your third quarterback, second quarterback in a super flex league, you got to draft somebody else and you hold on to him and you just wait. I mean, he was top 10 in fantasy points per game. When he's healthy, he is a top 12 quarterback. Even without DeAndre Hopkins, he is. there's just so much risk. I just don't think it's worth it. Take a running back, take a wide receiver, take somebody else. You could lose by taking Kyler in the 10th or the 12th round. You're not going to lose by avoiding Kyler Murray. Maybe nice come the end of the season as your quarterback too, but it's a long wait for him. And then Ryan Tannehill. Last year was a down year for Ryan Tannehill. Didn't run around as much. He had back-to-back years with like 7 rushing touchdowns, and he was sneaky on the ground, but he suffered a foot injury, and they took their alpha. He took the alpha wide receiver away from him. A.J. Brown, of course he was going to struggle. Now you got Hopkins. Hopefully Treylon Burks can stay healthy. We like Chigaquanko on this show. Derrick Henry's a beast. So I think Tannehill is an interesting, a decent little quarterback to target as well as maybe your third quarterback. Maybe that's the guy you roll out over Anthony Richardson early on, or somebody else that you're not loving the matchup. So he could be your third quarterback, and I think he has upside to be, a top 24, top 25 quarterback. So that's it. We're done. George is here. He can get us out of here. This is what I have in case they leave it for a Game Plus Network. Texas over 4.5 runs against the Halos, against Reed Detmers. Texas is number 1 or number 2 in OPS, WOBA, WRC Plus, and slugging against left-handed pitching. So we like them over 4.5 runs. And this is the third straight game we've done it, and we've hit the first 2. Luis Castillo over 6.5 strikeouts. Seattle, a matchup against Kansas City inside the top 12 in strikeout percentage and swinging strike percentage. And we got a little bit of a parlay here. Texas and Boston plus 162 on the money line, and Atlanta and St. Louis at plus 134 on the money line as well. George, get us out of here. We'll say goodbye to Game Plus Network and all you guys. Thanks for taking the time to hang out. We'll be back tomorrow. Cheers.